in retrospect, I just didn't care if I lived or died. And I came back and went back to the cult. I don't even know how that happened, but I kind of was like, didn't have anywhere else to go. So I ended up back at the cult. This time, the leader of the cult hired me. So she was actually paying me to babysit her son and be her housekeeper, all the same stuff, but there was a financial exchange. And I did that for another like a year and a half. Um, but I was super fucked up. Like my mind was really fucked up. And I couldn't reconcile what they had done to me and what was happening. And we got into this big fight where she just started calling me a coke whore. It was so weird because I had never done any drugs. I was kind of like, what are you talking about? But she just went off on me, and I told her to fuck off, and I left again. And that was the real final time that I left. At this point, I was probably 20 years old. And I decided, well, I am done with that. I'm going to go and rebuild my life. And I started talking to a woman who was in the cult with me and had always been really nice to me. She was the one who took care of all the horses. She was kind of like the only person there who made sure that I ate and took care of me and stuff. And she had gotten out of the cult, and I started talking to her because it was kind of like two ex-cult members come together and you swap stories and, oh my gosh, that happened. And she told me that when I moved to Hawaii, this is so fun. This is so crazy. I can't even believe this is real. Okay, I have to back up a little bit. The leader of the cult, before she started being a cult leader, was a undercover agent for the drug, what's it called? The Drug Enforcement Association. So it is. So she did like undercover at the Playboy Mansion and lots of like weird pre-life. So she was involved. She had connections with undercover agents. So apparently when I moved to Hawaii, she called up her buddy living in Hawaii doing undercover drug work and said, will you just keep an eye on, my foster daughter for me? She's out on her own, and I just want to make sure she's safe. So he's like, yeah, I'll put somebody on her. So they had been following me around, and I started dating this guy who was a drug dealer, and even worse, was a drug dealer for the Hawaiian mafia.
And you had no idea.
The reason, I had no idea. I didn't even know he was a drug dealer. I didn't know he was a drug dealer. I didn't know she had somebody following me. And so I guess the whole reason that like he broke up with me and the girls were jumping me and I got run off the island is the undercover agent started seeing things that he wasn't supposed to be seeing, because he was ending up at like drug deals that were actually organized by the Hawaiian mafia. And there's, like some politics there, I guess is the best way to explain it. So it was basically like, get this girl off the island. And so when I heard that and realized how like that, I don't know why, but that felt so, that was like the final straw for me. I was like, she had me followed. She broke up my relationship. And so from there, I just started to get really, really
like the two places she offered you to go were probably the two places she still had control over you, right? Like she had connections in Hawaii, and in the town she could still like keep an eye on you, basically, I think. And like,
yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I can see why you're frustrated, right? Because you finally think like, oh, okay, like I'm out and I'm free, and like you have like autonomy and like all this stuff, and like I can't even imagine trying to be 16 and like navigating, but and then it's fake. It's like she was still had power over you.
She still had power over me. No.
How long were you out of the cult for before you returned again that first time?
I left when I was about 16 and a half, almost 17. And I came back when I was 20.
Oh, well, you did good. That's like a pretty long time to be living in Hawaii by yourself. Shit, Hawaii's not cheap either, so.
Yeah, I had a good time. I love Hawaii. It was great until the end. But yeah, it's kind of like that. Have you ever seen The Devil's Playground? Oh, it's a really interesting documentary about, I think it's the Amish. And when their kids are 16, they say, "Okay, go get an apartment, have all the sex, do all the drugs, drink all the alcohol you want."
Yeah, I have heard
And,
about that.
and
Yeah.
then it's like this psychology trick, because then they invited me back, and it was kind of like, "Are you back? Are you 100% in? Are you going to stop asking questions?" And when she realized that I was not back, that's when she was like, "Okay, you're out of here."
Huh. Yeah, I it actually impresses me with the Amish because I think I forget what that's called where they send them out, but they have like a really high return rate though. Like most people do come back, and it's like that's like pretty impressive because Amish sound pretty crazy too.
I get it though. I get it, because you grow up in the sheltered environment. Even though I was abused, it was a sheltered environment, and then you get out into the world and you're like, I don't know which one is worse.
Well,
At least back there, I know what to expect.
the other thing too is like when you look at like intrinsic values, which intrinsic values are like mostly responsible for like people's happiness, right? It's like you need a purpose. Like I'm not gonna name all of them. I don't know all of them, but like purpose, sense of community, like being in nature sometimes, like exercising, like all this stuff. When you join like extreme religions like Amish or like cults, like what you're describing, you probably have a lot of those things, and so like of course people are gonna feel fulfilled and connected, whether it's like spiritually or like even to each other.
So, like, the most exciting part of my week would be if I was allowed to go to the grocery store on the grocery run. And that would be like so exciting. Yeah, I really wanted to go to school and have friends, and it was a bummer. Now I'm a really social person, and I totally understand.
Mm. So, when did you start realizing that, you know, something wasn't right?
Yeah, so it was a long period over multiple years, because it really started with losing my virginity. That was very impactful for me and really made me, I think the question that came up in my mind was, oh, like, God wouldn't do this to me. If this really is divinity, does not feel very divine. That was the beginning of my questioning. And then once I had that conversation with the other ex cult member and realized the lies that had been happening, that was an even deeper affront to me. I was like, oh no, like, truth was one of our philosophies, and you have completely been lying to me. And then the final thing was how she treated me when she kicked me out the final time, and had no truth to what she was accusing me of. So at that point, it was like I cut ties with the leader of the cult, but I still had this connection to the spirit. There still was a dialogue between me and that spirit in my head. And it maybe went something like, oh, this woman who you chose to channel through has clearly gone mad, but you and I can still have a relationship. And then I met a man. So I was out of the cult. I was 20, 21, really getting my life together. I had actually gotten my GED. I had passed the SATs, gotten into college, had some scholarships. I had a job. I had a car. I had a house.
How did you
Like,
get
I
how did you get to that point? I feel like people that grow up in normal environments can't even get there sometimes. Like, hey, you just got your GED, or was it like super challenging for you to get your GED? Because you had no
It
formal.
wasn't. I got, I mean, I've always been so hungry for knowledge, and I read so much. Like, I got my education from books. And so when I got out of the cult and kind of just assessed the world, I realized, well, I need an education so I can get a job,
Mm.
so I can be something. I wanted to be something. And it wasn't that hard. I mean, you go and you take the classes and you take the test, and I passed it. And then the SATs, I didn't do very good in math, but everything else I got enough. I got like a 1240, I think, which, just got me into college. So yeah, I just had a passion for it. And then once I was in college, I loved it so much. And I couldn't understand, like, I was looking at these other kids who just did not want to be there. And it was so easy for them to be there. And I was like, God, what's wrong with you? Like, you're so lucky to be here. Um, and I was loving it. And I was trying to figure out what I wanted to be when I grew up. And I was working at when I grew up, I was grown up, but what I wanted to be, what I wanted to study, I was working at a chiropractor's office. And I got really inspired to go to school to become a chiropractor. So, right at that same time, I met a man, and he was extremely charismatic. He was really smart. He was very handsome. Everyone loved him. I actually met him through a mutual friend. Everyone just loved him. Everyone raved about him, and he took an interest in me. And of course, my self esteem just was not good. And I had never had anybody really love me or be interested in me. So I fell head over heels in love with him. And he lived I'm not going to say where he lived, out of town. And we had this long distance relationship. It was back when like the internet was just starting. So we had an email, we would send like email love letters to each other. And he was just amazing. Like, I was so crazy about him. And he said, why don't you move up to where I live? Because there's a better college up there and there's a pre-chiropractic program. And so I was like, yes, absolutely. We had been dating for 6 months and no red flags that I could tell. Looking back, there's some red flags, but that's another story. So I moved up there and I got an apartment, and I got into the college that I wanted to get into. I got a job in the dean's office at the college, and it was really cool for about 3 weeks. And the moment that I got like settled, I was in my new apartment, had my classes and everything. I remember it like clear as day. I was supposed to meet him at the copy center because he was printing out resumes. And you know, when like you're so into someone that you take extra time to get ready and put on your makeup and you put on your cute clothes. I was like so excited to see him. And I walk into the copy shop, and he has this look on his face that I'd never seen before, and it was pure rage. And he was mad at me because I was 10 minutes late to meeting him. And I was like, I'm just full of sass at this point in my life. I have no reason not to be. I'm like, like, sorry, a girl's got to take the time that she's got to take. And he grabbed me by my arm and like pulled me out of the coffee shop and started just berating me with his words. Like, I disrespected him and how could I treat him like that? And I'm like, what the fuck? And I threw his arm off of me and I started walking back to my apartment, and he followed me, walked in the door behind me, and I turned around. I'm like, why are you even here? And he threw his keys at my face and totally like gashed open my face. And I was like super freaked out, and I kicked him out of the apartment, locked the door. I had the phone in my hands to call the police. And I don't know what he said or how it happened, but it's the moment that changed my life forever.
I want to apologize for the interruption. Please subscribe and hit the notification bell. It really helps out the channel and you'll never miss an episode. Thanks.
He convinced me to open the door and to let him back in and to put the phone down. And for the next 3 months, I was beaten and raped on a daily basis. Horrific experience. And I still am not entirely sure how I escaped. But that woman I told you about that kind of had always been there for me at the cult said that I showed up on her doorstep one day in my underwear. And she was about a 5-hour drive south. And I escaped somehow. I think I waited for him I like tracked his moves and, just kind of dealt with the beatings. until I was sure that there was this 30-minute window where I could get in the car and drive out of there. And I did it and I got away.
Was he like not
And
letting you leave the house and stuff like that, or?
yeah, he would walk me to my class and he would walk me to my work. But yeah, I wasn't allowed to leave the house. He controlled what I ate. He controlled what I wore. And it was pretty horrific. And at the time, I didn't know that there was like a number you could call. I didn't know what domestic violence was or resources or how to deal with it. But because of the way that I was raised, I knew how to disassociate. Like that's one of my best skills. And so I just took it for those 3 months until I could get out. And so from there, that's when things really went downhill. And I did try to get a little bit of therapy, but I was kind of too far gone at that point, and that's when I got into drugs and alcohol.
Oh shit! I was hoping that was rock bottom. Fuck.
Yeah, no.
I hope that. For a while. You said it really started to go downhill, and I was like, wait, that wasn't already downhill? Like, fuck, you already made me cry.
Oh, it got pretty bad out of that. I had to drop out of. I lost my apartment, drop out of college. My car got repossessed. And yeah, I had always said I'd never get into drugs because my dad and my mom. But somebody got me to take ecstasy. I think that was the first thing I took. And I was like, oh, I can survive like this. And I just checked out for many, many years until I got my life back together.
So what other drugs were you using?
Yeah, so it started kind of in the rave scene with ecstasy, mushrooms, acid, I mean, everything, all that stuff, ketamine. It was mostly based around music and parties and raves. And I would do anything. Like in retrospect, I just didn't care if I lived or died. So it was kind of whatever was thrown my way. And then I moved to Los Angeles and I wanted to get into the production industry. And I ended up more in the music industry. So I was like a set decorator and I managed DJs. So my job was going to parties.
Mm-hmm.
And by this time I was starting to have health issues. And not just from the drugs, but from all the complex PTSD. I was starting to have digestive issues and pain, and I had back pain and foot pain. And so then I found methamphetamines. And I hated them, actually, but it would let me stay up all night. I wasn't in pain. I could do my job. It was cheap. And I did that probably for a good 2 years, at least five days a week. But I mean, if you know anything about meth, it's like you're up, then you're sick, then you're up again. And I really started to suffer with depression and anxiety. I just stopped having an apartment. I just decided to kind of live out of my car, and I was in the festival scene, so I could just go from festival to festival, camping out. And I was working Coachella this one year, and people didn't know how messed up I was. Like, I was a really high functioning person. And so I was working Coachella one year, and I woke up in my tent with this excruciating pain in my tooth, and the base was what I remember. The base was like vibrating in my tooth, and it hurt so bad. And I was like, oh shit, I gotta go to the dentist. Like, something's wrong. This is the moment that I realized the people that I was hanging out with, like, when you hang out with drug users, they don't give a fuck about you. They don't care. So I went to my quote unquote friends and I said, there's something wrong with my tooth. They're also my bosses because we're doing this big build together for a stage there. And I said, like, something's wrong with my tooth. Like, I have to go to the dentist. And they're all, well, the show has to go on. You can go to the dentist when the show's over. Here, take some Oxy. Have a swig of whiskey. You'll be fine. And I did. And I finished out my job. And as I was driving from that gig to the next gig, I stopped at my mom's house. My mom was living down in Southern California at this point, and stayed with her for a couple of days and went to the dentist. And I was so strung out. I was not doing well, not sleeping. My tooth is a mess. And I went to the dentist, and this is what's wrong with our medical system. The dentist looked at my tooth and he said, you need a root canal. I can't see you for about 4 weeks. Here's a Vicodin prescription. Not a single question about my history. Like, he could have just taken one look at me and seen that I was a drug user. But no, he gave me a huge ass prescription of Vicodin. And I got totally addicted to Vicodin over the next 4 weeks to the, all the things. Like, I wasn't pooping. I couldn't go without my pills. I went and I worked another festival. And by that time, I wasn't eating. I was waking up in the morning, drinking, and doing lines of cocaine. And then, of course, also, was I doing meth at that point? I might have stopped doing meth at that point. I think I kind of finally figured out that I didn't like the way it felt. So I was doing cocaine and drinking whiskey. And it was that festival, that job, where I went, you have to change your life. I just had this voice inside that had always been with me, and the voice said, you're more than this. This doesn't have to be your life. And so I came off of that job and told my mom that I needed help, and finished the Vicodin prescription, and then went cold turkey off of all drugs except cocaine and alcohol. And I got into therapy. I started doing yoga. I started focusing on my health, and it took me another 1.5 years to get off the rest of the drugs. And that was 2009. And I've been clean ever since. And I'm actually right now starting my sobriety from alcohol. So I'm a month sober as well.
Congratulations. I feel like
It's taken a while. I'm 46 years old in a couple of weeks. It's been a long journey, but I'm here, and I'm married now. I have 2 kids. I have a business. I own my own business. I'm doing well financially. I own my own home, but it still haunts me every day. I ran into the leader of the cult at a coffee shop the other day because I still live in the same town, which I don't even know why I do that. Luckily, she didn't see me, but I had a full panic attack and was frozen in my seat for about an hour till I could get myself to move.
Yeah. What do you think some of the repercussions of, I guess, like, what was, what am I trying to ask? Like, where was your mental health at, and your mindset when you left the cult? I guess, what was the consequences of that?
Yeah. I think I was in complete flight. So my central nervous system was just in survival, get out of here. And if I had gotten into therapy right then and there had been an advocate present for me that could have recognized, like, go, come on, you need to get healed. Then I think I could have healed from that. But then each traumatic event after that just created more and more and more trauma, to the point that then when I started the drugs, I think I was in fawn. I just was like, I'm dead already, basically. And I'm just going to do something to help me get through the days.
What was the So that rave in your tooth and stuff like that, that was the breaking point for turning your life around, basically.
It was. Yeah, there was just a moment of clarity when I looked at the people who I was surrounding myself with, who I thought were my really good friends. And I invested all this time and energy, and we were artists. And I thought that we were kind of like a family. It was like I recreated another cult in a way. And in that moment, when they didn't say, go to the dentist right now, let me drive you to the dentist, and instead they handed me drugs, it just it just showed me that they didn't care. And it was almost like I could see where my future was headed if I continued. Um, and I wanted more. I wanted more. I remember this kind of brings up a memory from when I was 12 years old and I'm still at the cult. And I'm laying in one of those dormitory beds, like a bunk bed. And I just started like wondering what it would be like to die. And I started wondering if I could just will myself to die. And because of my spiritual belief systems at that time, I thought I could. I thought if I really wanted to, I could go into meditation and just stop living. And I decided in that moment that I didn't want to because something cool might happen tomorrow. And it was like this curiosity, that learner in me who went, life really sucks and I kind of want to stop living, but I'm going to keep going because something cool might happen tomorrow. And so it was a similar thought at the rave when my tooth broke, where I looked around and went, these people are not helping me. And I want to see if I can make something out of my life. Like there's got to be more than this. I wanted to be a mom. I wanted to have a family. I wanted to get married someday. And so it's just a power greater than myself inside of me that said like, hey, you can do something about this. You don't have to live like this.
It's just like
I never loved the drugs too. You know, like that Marilyn Manson song. I hate the drugs, but drugs love me. I never loved the drugs. I didn't like being high. I didn't like being cracked out. I have so much trauma in my body from being high and doing crazy shit that it was like I was begging for a way out of that life. I just had to find the path. And for me, yoga was a big part of it. I had one particular yoga teacher that probably saved my life. Just by he didn't do anything other than be accepting. He knew that I was cracked out on the mat, but he was like, come on, it's fine. And so it's just those slow, steady steps of realizing like, oh, there's some good in the world. There's good people. There's joy to be had here. I mean, I'm still trying to figure that out. Still trying to find.
So a lot of people that I interviewed, they're like, yeah, the drugs are fun for a little while, but then so many people tell me that like I hated being high. I hated being high. I didn't like the drugs anymore. You know, it was only for a little while where it was enjoyable, but like I'm just so surprised you turned it around. Like it's like that you're I don't want to say lucky, like I don't know what that is, like, but it sounds like you had a really positive outlook even when things were really bad too, which is surprising.
Yeah, I believe that we all have a well inside of us that is stronger than you can ever imagine. And it's just a matter of figuring out how to tap into that. And I guess for me, I wasn't willing to give up. Like I wasn't willing to actually throw in the towel and end it all. And so I figured if I'm going to be here and I'm going to be alive, I have got to figure out how to make something out of this life.
Well, another thing too is there's just so many times where it's like Like when you went to Hawaii, I feel like if I was 16 and I went to Hawaii, I would have ended up homeless, you know? And so there's like so many things about your story where I'm just like, how the heck did you like make that work? Like, you know?
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I don't know. I don't know. That sounds really incredible. Um, so you said you have a business now. What's your business now?
Yeah, so I teach people how to use essential oils because essential oils and aromatherapy, that was a big part of my healing. It's actually how I transitioned from depression and anxiety meds to none, to being completely naturally managing my anxiety and depression. So I got really obsessed into learning about aromatherapy and what it could do. And yeah, I started a business around it. So I teach people, I love working with other people who suffer with anxiety and depression, and I teach them simple techniques that they can use with aromatherapy.
Has there been any like long-term like trauma or anything that you've experienced from anything that you're going through or went through?
Yeah, definitely. I've got food issues, as you can imagine. Um, my husband doesn't, he's like, why do you do this? But I can't finish all the food on my plate. I'm really not sure why. Um, and I kind of don't know how to feed myself. Like my body, I'm learning, I'm getting better, but my body doesn't have the normal hunger cues. I think I've become more comfortable to be in a state of not eating. Definitely sexual trauma. That is a whole big difficult thing to unpack and heal. I'm scared, really scared of the dark. Like I can't walk out to the car by myself, even though it's just, in the driveway. Um, really scared of being home alone. I hoard money. It's really hard for me to spend money because I'm really afraid that I won't have it. I'm really good at making money. So that's my affirmation. What my therapist tries to help me with is like, I don't think you're ever going to not have money because you've developed a really good skill at making sure you do.
But are you comfortable with elaborating on like the sex aspect? Like what is it having sex now hard for you, or do you have dreams? Like what happens?
Yeah, I'm much better now. I've done a lot of healing. Amazingly, giving birth was extremely healing. I didn't understand at the time. I gave birth to both my kids naturally at home. My midwife, when she found out that I was a sexual abuse survivor, she was really worried. She wanted me to like read all these books and get into therapy. I didn't know what she was talking about. I couldn't intellectualize like why it would be that big of a deal. It was a trigger warning. I mean, everything should have been, but kind of is even more. When you've been raped, it's somebody coming into your body. And when you give birth, it's the same experience in some ways, but they're coming out. Um, and so giving birth to my first child was hard. It took a long time. I was in the pushing phase for like 4 hours. And then the healing after that was pretty intense. Um, and I guess what happens to me, I'm reading a really awesome book right now, actually, called Come As You Are by Emily Nagoski. I
I've
don't know
heard
if you've
about
read
it.
it.
Yeah, I've heard about it. I haven't read it yet. It's on my reading list.
What I'm learning from that book and what I've learned about myself is my personal arousal, desire to have sex, interaction with sex is normal, and we're all individual. What I've struggled with is feeling like I have to perform in some certain way, or that, like, if the man, um, I'm not bisexual, so if the man asks for it, I have to give it. And actually discerning the difference between me really wanting to and me responding to being asked has probably been the biggest struggle. And for a long time, I would pick partners who couldn't physically overpower me. Um, and when I met my husband, we've been married we're going on our 7th year and to get together for almost 10, um, which is great. But he's bigger than me physically. And that was a big hurdle for me to get over because if he wanted to, he could physically overpower me. Um, I had a lot of uh, scar tissue on my cervix. And so periods were extremely painful for me. And sex didn't have a lot of feeling. But after giving birth, you get a whole new cervix. So that's another reason that giving birth has healed me in some ways because I can actually have sensation now, um, where I couldn't before. And also just becoming comfortable with my body's own unique, I guess, just reactions to stimulation. I think it's just really a process of learning who I am sexually rather than just being a sexual tool that other people use. And mostly learning that I can say no. It's probably the hardest thing. I still feel like something bad's going to happen if I say no.
Mm. What do you think's been most beneficial?
I think the 12 steps, actually.
Like AA 12 steps?
I'm in something called ACA, Adult
Oh, okay.
Children of Alcoholics and Dysfunctional Families. There's a really good podcast actually called Adult Child. I'd highly recommend. But yeah, the ACA work has been astounding and confronting and debilitating and more healing than anything I've ever done before.
Mm.
And to like finally be around a whole room of people who are going through the same thing you're going through, and to have a framework to understand the family dysfunction, to look back in my family line and see, oh, that's been passed down. And then to now have hope that my kids are going to have a little bit better time because I'm doing the work. Yeah, it's good stuff. ACA is not for the faint of heart, but it's so powerful.